curious, not judgmental. Ted Lasso. Hey there, welcome to the Retirement Answer Man Show. My name is Roger Whitney. This show is dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but have the confidence, even during turbulent times, to lean into life and rock retirement. Welcome to the show. I have the sticker that I bought from one of my favorite shows, Ted Lasso, which is has some bad language in it, but it's a really endearing show. And it says, "Be curious, not judgmental." I think that's a little bit of the spirit of the show. I try to be curious always and not judgmental. I'm not going to say that I accomplish that all the time. I definitely had to practice that as I updated my net worth statement here recently, given that we're through 6 months of the year. I think every 6 months is a good minimum sequence to update your net worth statement. I actually do it monthly, but that's probably overkill. To refresh, where are my resources relative to where they were before? The nice thing about that practice is that it will show you the financial impact of the decisions you made, whether you earned income and you saved it, or you spent it, or you gave it away, whether you paid down debt. It'll show you the financial impact of those decisions. And it will also show you the financial impact, good or bad, of markets and your investments. And if you're like a number of folks that I've spoken with, opening up your browser and logging into your investment portfolio or opening your monthly statement isn't quite as fun as it used to be. It can be downright depressing. I liken it to, I remember when one of our children was in elementary school, in middle school, we would get a daily email showing the grade of every assignment that they did, and we would get it first thing in the morning. And it's good to be informed, but it actually created a really bad dynamic where our entire attitude about the day was influenced by this email, especially because, like most kids, they went through periods where they didn't do the work, or they didn't get a good grade. And we actually had to stop looking at it in the morning because of the way it framed our view. And just, it made us mad when they messed up, because we never messed up as kids. So how could they, that kind of thing. Opening your account statements every month can do the same thing. And it's easy to get judgmental about, oh, those are horrible investments, I knew I should have sold, rather than just curious, why did it happen? What does it mean to the plan, etc. So you may not have opened your statements as of late, but I'm going to warn you, the SMART Sprint coming up at the end of the show is going to be update your net worth statement. With that, though, let's move on to easier things for the moment and answer some of your questions. This show is sponsored by Boomer Benefits. They help people navigate Medicare, one of the most important decisions you make from a healthcare and financial perspectives in your retirement. So if you're facing a Medicare decision or you are working to build your strategy, I suggest you contact Boomer Benefits at boomerbenefits.com/RAM and let them help navigate you. The cool thing is, one, you don't pay anything because it's paid by the Medicare system, whether you use them or not. Two, they are really good at what they do. And three, they're who I turn to with clients when we're navigating a Medicare decision. So go check them out at boomerbenefits.com/RAM. Now it's time to answer some of your questions. And if you have a question for the show, you can go to rogerwhitney.com/askroger and leave a question. We'll try to answer it on the show. FYI, if you leave an audio question, it's a little bit like a fast pass. It can move you up to get your question answered quicker because we get so many questions in and we love to hear your voice. That said, our first question is from Tyler, and it is not an audio question. And it's about, should he pay down his rental property mortgage faster? Tyler says that he is debt-free except for the mortgage on his investment property, a single family home. He has roughly 18 years left on a mortgage that the interest rate is 3.37%. The rent covers the mortgage, taxes, insurance, property managed, even setting aside 10% for repairs and capital expenditures. Good job, Tyler. He says, I'm considering using some of this cash flow to prepay the mortgage, which seems like a sin in the personal finance community. Every time it comes up in forums, people say you shouldn't pay it off because that free cash flow can help you invest in other things. And he's done some analysis and he says, if I use this extra cash flow to prepay the mortgage, I'll have it paid off in 14 years, and that will save him about $20,000 a year in interest. Now, here's the thing with Tyler. Congratulations, Tyler. In 14 years, when he theoretically has this paid off, he'll be 47. He also says, I max out my 401k, I do a Roth IRA, I do my HSA, and I put about $5,000 in a brokerage account every year, and I have 6-month emergency fund and no other debt. Dude, you are rocking it. So number one, bravo to you for being so money-wise at such a young age. I wish I was at that age, by the way. 2, what are you doing listening to a retirement podcast at your age? Hopefully you're gleaning a lot of wisdom from me and others. So I think that's smart. You're just in a great position of power. So you're right. The general, especially in the investment community, in real estate communities, debt can be a powerful tool, right? You're paying 3.75% for this money, which is relatively inexpensive, especially if you tried to get a mortgage today. Why not use some of the deduction and take the excess capital to go buy another rental house or to invest it in markets, since you will likely statistically earn more than paying down the mortgage? That is the traditional wisdom. And mathematically, there is a decent argument for that, especially for someone at your age, right? With the compounding timeline that you have here, Tyler. That said, it doesn't make it right, even if mathematically it may work out that way, because you're definitely in a position of power. And just from the data and framework that you gave us, it sounds like likely your income will increase over time. So you're going to have plenty of excess cash flow to invest more monies elsewhere in the future, whether that's another rental house or continuing to contribute to your brokerage account. And you make a really good point that if you pay this off, it's going to give you a snowball effect of having semi-passive income sooner in life, when you're 47 in this case, where that will give you more options from a life perspective because you won't have to earn as much from whatever you do for a profession. So there is no wrong answer here, Tyler. I am 100% behind you if you decide to pay it off. I am 100% behind you if you decide to redirect those funds to some other investment or even to a lifestyle perspective. You're not going to get this wrong here if you continue with the incremental decision making that has gotten you to this point, because you've done a yeoman's job of setting yourself up financially. I think the question you want to answer outside of quote unquote what is right based on what they say is what's right with you or you and your spouse if you're married. What's going to give you peace of mind and keep it simple for yourself? I think that's the central question here, Tyler. And that's a question that we can get really distracted from. What's right for you? That's the only journey you're on. I face this every day in my life in terms of how I'm building my business and decisions I make from a business perspective. And I'm rarely making decisions that are about what mathematically seems to make the most sense. I'm making decisions based on other factors that are much more personal to me and how I want to live my life and what kind of culture I want around me, etc. So trust yourself, I think, is the big message here, Tyler, because you're doing a great job. All right, our next question comes from Adam, and yay, Adam, it is a voice question. So let's check out Adam's question.
Hey, greetings from sunny Baghdad. My name is Adam. I'm an active duty service member, and I am about 1 year away from retirement. In retirement, I expect a $70,000 a year inflation-adjusted pension. My question has to do with my asset allocation with my retirement savings. Because the whole 60-40 or 80-20 split between equities and bonds is supposed to get you some amount of safe investments, you can't do any safer than a pension backed by the United States government. What do you think about some people I've heard that have said that means that all of my investments should probably be in equities? I'm very curious about your answer. Thank you.
Hey, Adam. I hope you're in good spirits and safe in Baghdad. I'm sure you're excited for your retirement. God bless you. That's a great question. We're dealing with the infamous they say again, and it comes down to your particular plan for your life. So how do you account for a pension and Social Security for that matter, if you receive it, when you're figuring out how do I allocate my investment assets? So what they are saying, Adam, generally comes from the mindset of taking an accumulation portfolio and trying to retrofit it into a decumulation or retirement stage of life. And that you can retrofit things to a point or jerry-rig it, but ultimately it wasn't meant for that case. And that's usually what I see when we're talking withdrawal rates and what your portfolio should be at a given age. It's taking an accumulation mindset and trying to retrofit it into something else. So here's the way I would approach this, Adam. And if you've listened to the show, you might have heard this, and perhaps we can share a series in 6-Shot Saturday that talks about retirement as a project. Note to Nicole, who listens to every episode, Nicole Mills, are you listening? We'll put a link in 6-Shot Saturday to a series where we outline the step-by-step process for how to put together a plan of record. And we'll share that in 6-Shot Saturday. If you're not signed up for that, you can sign up for it at 6shotsaturday.com or at rogerwhitney.com. That's our weekly email where we can easily share links that we talk about. But here's the deal, Adam. I'll give you the short version. Is when you are planning your retirement, first you want to forecast what you need to live a great base life. You're spending, right? Then you want to organize what income sources you're going to have. So when you retire from the military, you are likely going to have your 3 categories. You're going to have, social capital, which are Social Security, which might not happen for a while for you, and pension. Those are considered social capital. So you're going to get the $70,000 a year pension that you mentioned, and it's going to start on a particular date. So that's going to help offset spending. And then when you do that cash flow forecast, you're going to see I am going to spend X, my spending, and then I'm going to receive Y from my pension and perhaps from Social Security. And then maybe you're going to receive some human capital because you're going to do some part-time work or some other work, and you'll build a cash flow forecast. And then what you'll find is the amount of your lifestyle that's not covered by your pension or Social Security and your work. You might have a deficit because you're spending more than you're earning in this retirement state. And this doesn't matter whether you're in the military or you have a pension or not. The process is still the same. Let's assume you have a deficit here, Adam. Let's say it's $20,000 a year that isn't going to be covered by these income sources in retirement. Well, then now we know we're going to have to get $20,000 a year from our financial capital, our money, our investments. And then that will inform how you build your pie cake. And if you're not familiar with it, we'll do a brief primer on it. A pie cake is essentially multiple asset allocations based on the purpose of the money. It's like asset liability matching. So you build it with your contingency fund, which is essentially your emergency fund. And then the second layer is going to be what we call the income floor. In this example, Adam, if you need $20,000 a year from your money because you don't have income to cover that spending, I would suggest starting as a benchmark to start at, of assuming you want to have 5 years of expected outflows pre-funded. So 2 times 5 of 20,000, that's going to be $100,000. That's going to be that income floor. And so that essentially is going to be in bonds or very secure instruments that mature when you need the money. And the goal of this money is getting the return of your money at the appropriate time so you can pay your bills. Once you've built this out, now you're in a position of power, Adam, in the sense that even if you're not working, you have the next 5 years of your life pre-funded. Then you can start to look towards the rest of the money that you have that isn't covering your life. And then you have some decisions to make of how aggressive that money could be. All of this is devoid. How aggressive that money is not dependent upon earning income or the fact that you're in retirement. It's based on the time frame that sets that money up for success. Some people will build an income floor of 8 years. Some people have so much social capital that they can afford to be more aggressive. So as an example, let's say you build this up and let's assume you have $500,000 after you've put this in place. And you're asking, well, how aggressive should that be from bonds to equities, as an example? Part of that is just personal preference, your quote unquote risk tolerance. Another part of that could be, Adam, that let's assume that your pension and then Social Security when it kicks in covers 70 or 80% of all of your needs. So this social capital bucket, pension, Social Security, covers pretty much most of your life. So you have a nice tailwind pushing you regardless of markets. If you have social capital that covers a high percentage of your life, then you could afford to be more equity centric because you have so much guaranteed income coming in. And I think that's how you work through how you allocate your funds. And you will end up with an asset allocation of the whole based on this process rather than trying to figure out some model portfolio. So hopefully that helps you navigate it. I hope you navigate home safely, Adam. So our next question is an audio question from Michael. So let's check out what Michael has to say.
Hi, Roger. My name is Mike, and I'm a member of the RRC. I've been listening to your podcast for about a year now, and I really appreciate the way you go through organized ways of thinking through complex subjects. I'm hoping you can help me with a way to think through a decision we need to make. I'm retiring next month, July, and my wife and I are trying to decide the best location for our retired selves. We currently have 2 properties, one in Virginia and another in North Carolina. Our plan is to sell one or both of the properties and build our dream home for our retirement years. Both locations have good points in terms of available activities and good health care, but neither is optimal in terms of visiting our children. We're struggling with whether or not to stay in one of the areas where we already have a property or move to an entirely different area. Have you put together a method to assess location in retirement? Thanks for the help and keep up the great work.
Hey, Mike, that's a great question and a really important one when it comes to retirement. Now, we have definitely walked through this numerous times on the show, and I'm sure we have a meetup in the club where we've walked through a framework. And part of what we're doing in the club, Mike, and I'll share with everybody else, is we're working on creating these decision pods, which are frameworks with enough information, but also a step-by-step process to navigate a particular decision. So, Mike, we already have on the agenda to create a framework, a decision pod in the Rock Retirement Club to how do I walk the journey of thinking through where do I move or land in retirement. So we can look forward to that in the Rock Retirement Club as we build out this library of decision pods. But let's just talk about it. So you have a house in Virginia, you have a property in North Carolina. Both are attractive, but neither is convenient to get to your children. And it sounds like you're retiring this month. So congratulations, buddy. A great time to retire right in the bear market. Good timing. First off, I would say take some time. I'm assuming financially you're in good shape. Then take some time to decompress from work. Just like when someone passes, they say, don't make decisions for a while. I'm not telling you not to make a decision for a while, but I would be cognizant of the fact that you're in a period of a big life change. One of the top 5 life stressful events, I think, in most studies of retiring. Moving is another one. So acknowledge that and the fact that you are slowly shedding the skin of who you and your wife are, whether both of you worked or not, and moving into a whole new identity of who the two of you are and how you interact together as a married couple. So first off, breathe and acknowledge that so you don't make decisions thinking backward or from who you were. I would start with thinking about this is the chance. This is a clean slate. So you definitely don't want, it sounds like you're not, but you don't want to be constrained by the 2 properties you have and make it a binary choice, one or the other. And I think you rightly say you could sell both and do something else. This is a chance for the two of you to reorganize your life for this next phase of life and set up your environment. That's a phrase that I use a lot when I'm talking with clients and navigating this. This is your chance to really set up your environment. And environment means a number of things, right, Mike? It means, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it near the beach? Is it near the mountains? Is it able to access both? It means, is it in a community where it's organized, like a village is, where you have access to lots of social things, or is it rural in the country? I would start with the two of you. And a great method of doing this, Mike, is mind mapping. And if you go to the Retirement Masterclass within the club, we have a section near the beginning. I don't remember what section it is off the top of my head, where we talk about how to mind map, because that's a great decision-making tool that you and your wife can do together or separately. Say, okay, what do we want? Well, you mentioned one. We want to have easy access to the kids. We want to be near the mountains, or we want to be near the ocean, or we want to be within an hour or two of each. Start thinking in terms of environment. We want to have a place that is full of retirees. We want to live in the country. Start big picture in defining what sets up a really cool place. An example that Sean and I have been walking this journey is, we know we want to be in the mountains. We're mountain people. We want to be at higher elevation. We want low humidity. We want mild summers or winters, And that has slowly helped us define. And that's one reason why we go to Salida every year, because it fits a lot of those things that we conceptually thought of. And now we sort of fell into this. We weren't as intentional as we could have been. And then we started going there every year. And then we visited other places. We went to Fort Collins. We went to Beaver Creek, and those weren't quite fits for us. So we started from, what atmosphere do we want? And then we started to explore places that could be. So once you have that feeling somewhat defined, now you can, in your case, you can evaluate your property in Virginia and evaluate your property in North Carolina from that lens. And either one's going to be a clear winner, they're going to be equal, or both are going to be deficient in some important way. And then it's going to be, how do we explore where might be another place to go? But think of this as a journey where you're going to iterate on it, assuming you're not under any time crunch. And then as you start to frame that in, then you can get into the technical stuff of how close to the airport, do they have state taxes, all those more tactical things. But if you get the big picture right, what is the environment and atmosphere that you two want to have? That will help to limit the field of your choices. So look for that decision pod coming here in the future. Our next question comes from Dave. So let's check out what he's thinking about.
Hello, Roger. I am 61 years old and only 20 days from retirement, but who's counting? And wonder about a strategy to use debt as a source to fund life rather than liquidating securities while the market is down. I feel like I could be stepping into the perfect storm of sequence of return risks at the very start of my retirement journey. I'm debt-free and I have a significant open HELOC that I can tap. Is it better to take a guaranteed 4.5% loss on my funds by using my loan versus cashing out stock and realizing a 20% loss on those? I have faith that the stocks will rebound in time. Over 90% of my wealth is in deferred income assets, a 401k, and I'm going to start tapping that once my paycheck stops, but I prefer to hold out from that for a while if I can. Is this strategy crazy? I worked very hard to pay off all the debts before retirement.
Thanks for the question, Dave. And it's a perfect question for right now. And congratulations on your retirement, by the way. All right. Most of your money is in tax-deferred assets. You don't want to sell assets when they're 20% down. And should you use an interim loan to pay for life so you can wait for markets to recover? That is the central question from how I heard it. Well, first off, your assets, assuming stocks, are down 20% from the high. Unless you purchased these assets in the last year or two, you probably still have a profit. They just have moved in price relative to that. So I think let's qualify that. Now, I don't know in your case, but from the majority of people that have been long-term investors, they still have profits. It's just not as much as they used to. And we always peg what the number was relative to what it is. And it feels uncomfortable to liquidate something after it's just gone down 20%. Strangely, if we're gambling, it doesn't. If we lose money, usually we want to walk away from the table with the chips rather than keep playing to try to get back to where we were. But that's a whole different issue psychologically. I would be very cautious, Dave, of using, in this case, a HELOC to fund life to simply wait on the markets rebounding for you to sell, pay the tax, and then pay off the HELOC. For a couple reasons. One is I respect leverage as a tool and I use it from time to time myself. I have a mortgage and I chose not to pay it off. So I respect that leverage is a powerful tool. In retirement, though, I get a little bit more worried about it unless you are very well funded, because it can make a rough situation much worse. So let's game this a little bit and say you took loans against your HELOC and you're paying 4.75% on the loan. Well, you're going to have payments on that loan. On a HELOC, you have payments that you have to make. And most HELOCs are floating rates. So if interest rates rise, your interest cost may rise. And then let's game out that you do this. You take your $50,000 loan to help pay for life rather than selling and taking out of the IRA. What happens if the markets have another 1 or 2 legs down and those last 3 or 4 years? Now you're in a situation where you're paying interest on the HELOC and you're faced with, well, now do I sell to get the money I need, or do I take more loans on my HELOC and pay more interest to say, okay, now I'm going to wait for the markets to come back up even more over whatever time frame. And then ultimately, let's assume the markets do come back up. Well, now you have to take money out to pay for your life. You have to take extra money out and pay taxes on it to pay the payment on the HELOC. And if you want to pay the HELOC, you got to take extra assets out, pay the tax to pay off the HELOC and pay for your life. So it can make a rough decision right now significantly worse potentially. I think that risk is probably not worth taking. Markets are what they are. If you've been a long-term investor and you've not touched them, you've gotten a lot of growth on your assets when you were in the accumulation mindset. Now that you're retired, you're not in the accumulation mindset. You're in the how do I secure outcomes in my life environment, which is you having the money to pay for your lifestyle. We want to focus on making the main thing, and that's the main thing. So I would go through creating your pie cake structure. And if it forces you to sell, the assets are only worth what they're worth in any given day. And there's no promise they're going to go up tomorrow. No promise when they might go up tomorrow. Make the main thing. Get yourself positioned so you can have confidence to rock retirement. Because if you start taking loans out, you're on your heels already. And if this plays out longer, it's going to exacerbate the situation. Hey, honey, I used that one correctly. So I don't know if I'd do that. Now, what other options could you look at? Well, you could look at working part-time. You might, right? You could work part-time just to earn a little bit of income, which is going to help defray what you have to sell. And then it's only interim. You could potentially, if you're over 62, I believe it's 62, you could consider a reverse mortgage. That's a little bit more permanent decision, but to help cash flow wise. We're going to have a series on taking equity from your house sometime this year. But I would poke around with what other things you could do to ride this out. Maybe you moderate some of your initial spending so you don't have to take as much out or sell as much to try to plug the gaps. But I'd be very wary, except for very short-term tactical moves in using a HELOC in the way that you described. So hopefully that gives you some context there, Dave. Our next question or comment comes from Joel, and it's around reframing old. Joel says, hey, Roger, the series on functional health you had in June was outstanding. May, I think it was. Outstanding with much valuable information. You had a segment at the end describing at what age do you transition from middle age to old age. The stereotypes of old is very negative, a very negative one in society, unfortunately. Think about reframing as a positive message. When do you anticipate having the wisdom of an elder? At what age will you not need to work from a financial standpoint? Rocking retirement means celebrating achievement and the meaningfulness of life as we walk down this path. Thank you. So I appreciate you calling that out. Old. That can be a negative connotation. What is old, right? I whine about being old and a 70-year-old client says, shut up, you're young. A 75-year-old talks about being old and a 90-year-old says, hey, you're not old, you're young. It's all relative and you're correct. And we had Dan Miller ask a question last week who's 75. He's as young and sprite as anybody I know, even at chronologically much younger than him. So I appreciate you calling that out, Joel. We got to be careful with our language when it comes to that because it frames. And if we start in where I think this could really hurt Joel too, right? Is when we start saying, I am old. No, I'm old. I can't go do that anymore. No, that's for young people. I can't do that. That is very dangerous framing because it starts to limit what you see as possibilities. You can do a lot more than what you think you can do. What do you mean you can't mountain bike when you're 55? We've gotten those, we've had people say that when they hear I mountain bike, how dangerous that is as I'm old. I'm 55. Heck yeah, I can mountain bike when I'm 55. George Bush, what did he do? He jumped out of an airplane at 80 something. We have to be careful in the stories we tell ourselves because that's the story that's going to become who we are. So appreciate that perspective, man. So our last question today comes from Lori, and it's a timing question. Lori says, I am 2 years from retiring, I hope. I turned 65 in March of 24. I'd been thinking I'd retire once Medicare kicks in. However, I'm eager and restless, so I'm thinking end of year 23 might be feasible if my employer COBRA benefit or ACA insurance lasts for 3 months or so. I think I could fund life for those 3 months. My retired husband and I have lived frugally. We have modest income and have benefited from the periodic advice of good financial planners over the years. So I'd like to know the pros and cons of timing of retirement. End of year? The day I turned 65? If I did it at the end of 2023, I still would get the benefit of a raise and year-end bonus. I also have some vacation and that will cash out. Really enjoy the podcast. Would love your perspective. That's a great question, Lori. Now, there are definitely considerations on the timing of when you retire, and you mentioned a few of them. When you're going to qualify for Medicare, annual bonuses, vesting of stock options, raises, annual benefit packages in terms of refilling, vacation allotments, severance packages, can sometimes be based off of high income years, employer-sponsored health insurance. There are definitely a number of considerations here. And some are, a month here, a month there. I stay an extra month. I get this year-end bonus where I won't get it if I leave a day early. There are some of those little, very micro timing issues. And then there's the macro ones. I don't want to worry about health insurance, so I'm going to wait till 65, which one that you pointed out. I think the best way to approach this, Lori, is to not make a judgment. Be curious about this. And build your first plan of record with your first base scenario. And it almost doesn't matter which one it is. Let's say it's wait until you're 65, and then you factor in Medicare costs, etc. And you create a feasible plan there, factoring in what bonuses you might receive and so forth. And then use that as the basis to create a what if scenario. What if I retired 2 years earlier or a year earlier? And now that you have this base assumption, you can create this what if, and you can say, then you can input, well, here's my extra cost for healthcare. Here's the bonus that I'm not going to receive. Here's the extra spending I'm going to have to cover. And then you can evaluate that relative to the feasible plan of record you've already created and see if it's still feasible and if there's any material difference to your life and the resilience of the plan. So it's always good to have that first base down and then create what if scenarios off of that to help inform your decision. Because you might find that, wow, I retire a year or two earlier. Even if I miss out on this bonus, I'm still in a great position to reach all the life goals that I've already defined. So it really is just extra money. Extra money is nice, gives slack to the system. It helps out when markets are bad, but you may find out you don't need the extra money. it's not going to make a material difference in your life, then it becomes more of a value decision rather than I've seen people tell this story to themselves. Now, I can't retire to 65 because I got to get that Medicare. They just tell themselves that story without actually looking at it in a curious way and missing perhaps the opportunity. Wow, I could retire today. And yes, I pay more for healthcare, but my plan still works and I'm gaining 3 years of my life to do what I want just because I was curious about it rather than just telling myself a story that I had to wait to 65. That's what we don't want to do. We want you to at least make the decision in an organized way that you want to work, not just because you told the story that you have to work. You know, one of my favorite stories around this from my experience, and this is years ago, it was a client and it was a vesting of some stock options of some sort. And they had the decision of working. Essentially, this was, the basis of it. If I work 4 more months, I will receive roughly $1 million+. So is it worth working 4 more months for $1 million? That was the question. Hard to pass up $1 million. I'm looking at what's happening with the golf tournament, the PGA Tour, and this new alternate league, LIV, I guess it's called. They're paying big money and a lot of big people are going. It's hard to pass that money up. And in this case, through a lot of discussions, it wasn't worth the money. And they retired 4 months earlier. But it was done in an organized way because it wasn't going to have a material difference on their life. Now, this is an extreme case, obviously, but that's always good for an example. So I would go through that process, Lori. With that, let's go set a SMART sprint.
On your marks, get set.
And we're off to set a little baby step you can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, in the next 7 days, I told you what this was going to be. Get yourself some coffee. Maybe it's an early Saturday morning after you're done reading 6 Shots Saturday email. Gather your statements, log into your accounts, and update your net worth statement so you can see the value of your financial resources as of the end of June, first 6 months of the year. And if you've done this consistently, you can compare it to, the beginning of the year and then last year. And it's probably down unless you've had some big inflows, and that's okay. But now you know the resources you have. And now you can go through some matrix of, do I have enough cash reserves? How is my balance between tax categories? But the first step is to update your net worth statement so you know where you're at today. Hey, did you know that we do flat fee plans now at Agile Retirement Management? We just started about a month ago. If you're interested in getting a project set up and your retirement questions answered so you can go off and implement it on your own, go check it out at retireagile.com. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance reference is historical and does not guarantee future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. Make sure you consult your legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions.